rights are not always absolute. They are a sufficient force that they often trump purely utilitarian calculations about what might otherwise be in the interest of the majority. The age of rights in the West deepened and widened with the advent of the Second World War. Until the late 1930s, the international political system and international law continued to maintain that how a state treated its inhabitants inside its borders was not a matter of legitimate international concern. But with World War II and the mounting evidence of atrocities in Germany and in the countries it occupied, how Nazi Germany treated those under its rule became a matter of acute international concern. And with victory, the Allies drafted the Nuremberg Charter, one of the first human rights instruments under which the Nazi leaders were charged with the new crimes of waging aggressive warfare and crimes against humanity. At the same time, the Allies drafted the Charter of the United Nations, which prohibited the use of force, military force by states, except in self-defense or with the approval of the Security Council, and declared the promotion of human rights to be one of the primary goals of the new organization. A UN Commission on Human Rights was set up, and one of its first tasks was to draft the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was a seminal document in the development of the new international human rights movement, and something that Canadians in particular can be proud of because one of our own, John Humphreys, was one of its principal drafters. All of this constituted a new world order which was meant to guarantee both global and human security. And it is this world order, along with our older democratic rights regimes, which is disintegrating as our government succumbs to U.S. demands to integrate our security policies with its new vision. I said we're moving from an age of rights to an age of terror. And of course, the age of terror is what the Bush administration, and make no mistake, the Democratic and Republican candidates for the current race for the presidency would have us believe that we are living in since 9/11. An age when sophisticated transnational networks of Islamic terrorists pose an unprecedented and even existential threat to our free societies and world peace. That's what they would have us believe. I don't believe that most Canadians think that, though. And I would quite sure that you would not be surprised if I told you that U.S. State Department reports themselves show that between 1995 and 2003, the total number of people killed by terrorism globally each year, the average number was under 800. That's including the 9/11 attacks. And while no death caused by terrorism is acceptable, the numbers, even when inflated, are minuscule compared to the 1.2 million people killed yearly in car accidents, and compared to the truly existential threat, not just to our nations, but to our species, posed by global warming, a threat which governments are doing comparatively little about. But, you know, in difficult times, ironies abound. In many ways, the era that we've entered since 9/11 is an age of terror. An age where an individual at any time may be presumed guilty and blacklisted from a job, dragged out of line, denied the right to travel, listened into, detained, and even kidnapped and tortured, without ever knowing the allegations made against him or the criteria by which he is being judged. It's an age where the individual is answerable to the state, not the other way around, and in which our societies are increasingly being governed in security matters by executive fiat rather than by deliberative houses of government. It's an age of widespread use and official acceptance of torture, of legal black holes, an age of new large-scale detainment centers being built in the United States, of DNA databases being set up to register ordinary citizens, of centuries-old protections being suspended in permanent states of emergency, and an age of preemptive warfare, where the UN Charter restraints on the use of force have been brushed aside, and in which there are seemingly no limits on the strong, the use of force by the strong. In short, we are entering an age where the most brutal utilitarian calculations trump rights and even the rule of law and democracy. I think there's just so much to be said about what is happening in the US, the UK, Asia, Latin America, developing countries, that could be said to illustrate my thesis tonight. And even limiting our discussion to Canada, there's an enormous amount to cover. But perhaps a good place to start is with the Smart Border Agreement and accompanying action plan. This was an administrative agreement which was negotiated between John Manley, when he was our Deputy Prime Minister, and Tom Ridge, who became the head of the Department of Homeland Security in the US. And in many ways, it's the blueprint for security integration with the US. There's three things I like to note about it. First, it's premised on the idea that governments have to preempt future terrorist attacks. Now, this idea of preemption is ubiquitous today, and at first blush it seems like a reasonable goal. But in fact, it's become the mantra of governments, the mantra that governments use to justify their incursion on our rights. And it's a very dangerous idea.